and welcome to today's segment of The Power of Money. I'm your host, Michelle Graves, internationally and nationally known as the Money Lady. And I'm here today, as I have been every week for years, talking to you, my viewers, around the fascinating world of money, people, ideas, concepts, trying to bring you new information so that you and your family can make better decisions in your life. Today, I have a special guest today to talk about women in leadership. Very well versed, very well traveled, a seasoned alpha female, Diane Grizzard. Grizzard. And she will be sharing for the next hour the challenges that women face in leadership. Have things really changed? Are we finding ourselves repeating many of the same situations 10, 15, 20 years ago? Myself, as I'm in my 60s now, I am frustrated a lot because, unbelievably so, we are still dealing with stereotypes and behavior patterns that are just simply unacceptable today. 40% or more of women today are single and taking care of children and taking care of households. Women are still not being paid comparable to men for the same work. The number of women in leadership and decision-making positions is certainly not what it should be and what it could be, given the fact that women are officially the largest population group in this country. So, without further ado, I'm going to be talking on the subject today with my very special guest, and she's going to share her insights and thoughts with you and I today. And thank you. I'm so glad to have you here today.
Thank you so much for the invitation to be here, Michelle.
My delight, my delight. Why don't we begin by telling people, the viewers, a little bit about yourself and give us a little bit of background.
Well, Michelle, I would say that the biggest influence in my life, even though it happened so much longer ago, was with my grandmother, who told me over a cake bowl of batter that, Diane, your job in life is to figure out all that God has in store for you. And my grandmother had these big bosoms. And when she said that, she would say, all. And it seemed like for a little girl, it was like a lot. And that set in me a huge sense of adventure. Okay. And so my life is really one of adventure, world traveling, having lived overseas. I lived in Liberia, West Africa. I was a midwife there. I was there during the 1980 coup, and I stayed 4 years later. Both of my sons were born there, and so what God has in store for me continues to grow, and my job really is to always stay on top of, am I following His guide?
That's wonderful. That is absolutely right on point. I have to ask you, what precipitated your decision to go into Liberia? The history of Liberia, as you know, that was a created nation state for the slaves over here in the United States so that we would have a place to immigrate to after the Civil War. So it's got an interesting history. So tell me, how did you get involved with that nation state?
Well, I became involved because I'm a 60s child.
Okay, me too.
So Tom Brokaw calls 1968 the year of the Cultural Revolution in America. So as I'm thinking about, what contribution can I make from an African American standpoint, the Black Power movement was all very strong in those days. People were thinking about, how do we extend to our Africanness? How do we extend our African American training, development, upbringing to actually make the continent of Africa a better place? And so while I knew about the background of Liberia at that time, in my mind, what was really important is the fact that they spoke English. They used the American dollar as currency. So to go from Cincinnati to Liberia at that time was like moving from Cincinnati to the South. Okay, even though it was so long ago, so it was a long way, of course, but the ability to transition and find comfort there, to be able to blend in, to be able to see yourself fulfill your dreams was made easier because there weren't the kind of language barriers that you might think otherwise.
What about cultural barriers? Because it is Africa.
It is Africa. So one of the first things that I had to contend with is the fact that they don't always have water. It doesn't matter if you don't have plumbing, because we had plumbing, but because of the way the turbines work and because they have 6 months of rain and 6 months of season, there were often times that there wasn't enough water in the rivers to turn the turbines, and therefore the electricity would be out and there would be little water coming into your apartments and your homes.
Goodness.
And so we practiced taking cold showers before we even left.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Getting used to mosquitoes was one of the things that I had to deal with. And I was 6 months pregnant when I arrived. And so I had 2 months of pregnancy and then a delivery of my very first child under those circumstances. So getting used to the mosquito tent, getting used to burning the mosquito coil, to keep the mosquitoes away, were all of the things. But you know what? I'm going to tell you, Michelle, when you have a passion, I went there to be a midwife. So that actually superseded any discomfort that I felt around the mosquitoes, around the rain, around the the fact that there was inconsistency in power and water. The idea that I would be able to help women in Africa deliver their babies and then be there for them as they worked to create the healthy environment so that their children could grow into adulthood was my passion. And I also ran a secretarial service because you can't get any money. Nobody's going to pay you to deliver a baby. You might get an egg or a chicken or something, but you're not going to get any money. So the power of money.
Right, exactly, right.
So you have to have a way to actually earn some money. So I had a secretarial service that I used, which was also another very interesting experience, but I used that as my income earning opportunity. I'll tell you a quick story about the women, though, that both warms and breaks my heart, that taught me a lot about the culture, which is your question. So I participated at the time in a program that the World Health Organization created called Breast is Best.
Okay.
And that was important because women in Africa, in most African countries, this was an international ban that the World Health Organization called against Nestle's milk formulas, because
heard about that.
Women in these countries where they could not afford to really purchase the milk and maintain it would buy the milk, dilute it with water, because they would say their money can't reach. So when their money can't, we might say we're broke, but they say my money can't reach. And so when your money can't reach, you dilute the milk with water, then you reduce the nutritional value of the milk for your child. In addition to that, the water was not clean, and that they used to dilute it, so they would give their baby, unintentionally of course, dysentery. And then because of the malnourishment, the baby wasn't strong enough to fight it off, and so the infant mortality rate was something like 1 in 20 babies would live past a year old. So we went up country to teach that breast milk is the best milk. And that was just, again, it was heartbreaking because you saw the devastation of what would happen if they didn't, decide to go on and breastfeed their babies. But it was also so heartwarming because you saw that every mother wanted their child to live, and they just didn't know how they were contributing to that infant mortality. And so, so once again, you're not going to get paid for that because you're volunteering for the World Health Organization. But the mothers are going to come in, and I got the best bananas at the least expensive price at the market. Almost every time
I was going to say, here she comes.
Absolutely. I had my own price for bananas at the market.
But you know, that brings up an interesting thing, because a lot of women in the United States, when I talk to them about Africa and my experiences, do not understand how things get twisted because you don't understand culture and poverty. And the women did want the best. But it would seem to me that a mega corporation like Nestle's could have had insight as to what they were actually creating.
Their insight was profit.
I understand that. I got that.
That was the international insight.
I got that.
And
opportunity and profit.
Exactly.
Africa's a big country.
Exactly.
I got that.
Exactly.
So you started a secretarial service while you were over there. This is so fascinating. You go to West Africa, Liberia, 6 months pregnant, set to be a midwife. Did you birth your own child, or did you have a sister?
I had a midwife.
You had a midwife.
I had
as well.
Both of my children. I have 2 sons and never seen a hospital maternity ward.
Well, you are very, very fortunate. So you actually had an opportunity to birth.
Yes.
In the traditional method, which
Yes.
fortunately women in Western cultures are getting to.
Right.
And I'm so glad they are getting to it, because babies are going to come.
They call it a doula now. So where I was a midwife in those days, today they call it doula, D-O-U-L-A.
D-O-U-L-A.
So oftentimes people will, you can get a doula to work with you up until you have your baby. And now hospitals have what they call birthing centers. So the very thing that we created in someone's home can be found in the hospital. You can even have your family around, your children or things like that. My granddaughter, who lives in Savannah, Georgia, was birthed in a birthing center, and they used a water. They had a water pool.
Yes,
because that also eases the labor pains.
Yes.
So, you know, things have actually progressed over time. But in those days, there's an old saying among midwives in the South, is that women want to have their babies the way they should have them, at home in their own bed.
Thank you.
Isn't that just, I mean, it makes sense.
It totally makes sense. So how did you transition from midwifery and to having a secretarial company in Liberia? That is impressive. To resource, how did you know how to resource?
Well, the thing is, once again, some of my roots, there's a trajectory between my grandmother, my upbringing, and all of the things that I've done. Most people don't take the time to actually peel that onion back to understand that. But my mother always taught me, even though I had a degree when I went to Liberia, she always taught me, have something that you can do, Diane, so that you can always make money.
Thank you.
Secretarial service was something I could do.
Okay.
And so and also the other thing about Liberia is that because of its history, there have been so many African Americans who chose to settle there over the years.
Really?
From Marcus Garvey's days, that's where they went.
Okay.
And there were a lot of Garveyites in Liberia at the time. Most of all of the revolutionary movements of one kind or another found their way to Liberia. And so I ran into a guy who was from Maryland, I believe, who was married to a Liberian woman, but he was this huge CPA, and he had a CPA office in Liberia. And it was, his wife had a big home, so she had a beauty salon on one side of the business, of the house. He had his CPA office, and they had another office that they rented to me for the secretarial service. Exactly. So it was this huge business. It was like a mega complex, and that's where my location was. And they've sent business to me. What was so wonderful about it is that I ended up knowing everybody's business in the country, because if people didn't want their secretary in their office to know something, they would bring the stuff to me to type.
Exactly.
So letters, and I mean, we did things for the Sun Moon Ministries, for some of the ministers of the country. It was fascinating. So it was just wonderful to be able to have juggling all of them.
Before the computer era, because
that was before. So we were literally typing. We had typewriters.
Goodness gracious, that is amazing.
Yeah, we had typewriters. We wrote speeches. I hired people to come, and so we would, so like a consulting service.
Yes.
If someone had a speech to do, we wrote speeches for the Minister of Finance when he went to the United Nations, and so so it was wonderful. We had a sort of a full service, stop shop.
Isn't that just wonderful,
Yeah.
to come from America, the United
right.
States of America, into Liberia, to find yourself transitioning? And may I ask how old you were when all of this was going on?
I was 29.
You were a
I was
young
29
woman.
when I went to Liberia, correct.
Goodness gracious. Full of energy and can-doism.
And full of idyllic thoughts and beliefs. Because in those days, you believed that if you wanted to do something, you could actually make it happen.
Yes.
And I think that's one of the things that challenges women today. Sometimes we just don't believe that things can happen. We need to have enough idealism to actually move us into something that's other than what we know, the status quo. And so that risk-taking opportunity is what I took a hold of and stepped into. And it really was what my grandmother said. Find out all that God has in store for you. I didn't know I was going to be in a coup when I got there, because a year after I arrived, the military coup occurred, and everybody in the cabinet of Talbert was killed. The entire cabinet was put on stakes at the ocean and shot down. And he was killed in his bed with his wife by his own soldiers. So that happened a year after I arrived. And so none of that was anticipated.
Not at all.
But when you're there and you're young and idyllic,
yes,
you have to have all of those pieces of the formula.
Like,
you're young, you're idyllic, you're passionate.
You're passionate.
You didn't anticipate it, so now you're, in fact, we couldn't have left right away if we wanted to, because one of the first things that happens in a coup, in any of these takeovers that even America does, anytime there's that kind of military or civil instability, they shut down communication and they shut down travel. You're not going anywhere.
Wow.
Because they have to control
the borders. They have to
control it.
Right, transit. They have to.
So we couldn't go anywhere anyway. That was the first, well, the first time I had martial law was in 1968, the riots in Cincinnati.
Yes.
Then the second time I had martial law was in Liberia, where you couldn't go anywhere from 6 p.m.
Where they killed the president and all of his cabinet.
His entire cabinet. And,
goodness gracious.
And then the country was on martial law for about 3 months, from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m.
My gosh. How did business get done in that environment?
It was very chaotic. Well, because you didn't know who was in charge.
You
find out who's in charge because you're listening to the radio, and Samuel K. Doe came on the radio and say, "I am the new president of Liberia." And he started announcing more people that he wanted to kill.
Oh, no.
He did. On the radio.
On the radio.
On the radio.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
On the radio.
Oh, no.
So you have to be young and idyllic to stay. That's all I say.
You know, but that is so absolutely fascinating, because I look back on that time in history with Kwame Nkrumah and some of the great Pan-Africanists, Sekou Touré, and people that were just way ahead of the pack. And then you look at what's happening in Liberia.
All of those guys came to visit us.
Oh, my goodness.
Everybody who was anybody at that time came to Liberia, because Liberia was sort of the African melting pot, if you will.
Yes.
And because of its history, and because so many nationalists, Pan-Africanists, you know, Muslims, people from around the world who had this sense of freedom. Michelle, I have to say to you, there's nothing like being a person of color, living in a country where everyone is of color. The idea, the psychological freedom that comes with knowing that no one is going to use the N-word.
Oh, my gosh.
That you never have to second guess, is someone doing something or not doing something to you or for you because of your skin color, because everybody has the same skin color.
But you know, it's a dual-edged sword, though, because Black people killed Black people in Liberia.
Exactly. And so it makes you understand. That's why today, while I understand race in all of those dynamics, I also know there are so many socioeconomic situations.
Yes.
Class.
Yes.
And so in Liberia, class was the dynamic. Tribal dynamics were also at play. And the other thing about those people who came from America, they called them Americo-Liberians. So their ancestry was from America.
Right.
They came to Liberia, and they created a class of themselves. And then the indigenous people and all of the tribal people who had never left the country were also multi-tribes. So you had all of these dynamics.
My goodness.
There was something like 20 or more ethnic tribes in Liberia before the folks from America came and became Americo-Liberians. But Americo-Liberians. And they set up a separate class, Michelle, that mirrored the class that they had in antebellum South.
No.
They had envy. They had envy of Massa and Massa's wife. So I mean, we could talk about this forever. I know that that's not the whole topic of our conversation.
But this is so fascinating.
But that's what happened. They brought the
devastation.
They brought the Negritudes
into another country.
That's right. So the houses that they so these were free men and women. Some of them were already free. Some of them were freed.
Okay.
Some were freed in order to leave. You got to remember the impetus of the American Colonization Society to actually help free men and women from America leave and go to Liberia was because they were never going to be equal. Even if they were going to be free, they were never going to be equal. And they were not making any bones about it. So the American colonization was established to help facilitate that immigration. And also, you got to remember, Nat Turner, Denmark Vesey, and all of those guys who were off, some of the, Denmark Vesey was a free man who helped plot the slave revolution in Charleston. And so it never was fulfilled, but he helped to plot it. So white people were scared, plantation owners were scared.
And then, of course, we were looking at what was happening in Haiti.
And
other of the South American countries.
So they didn't want that. They didn't want it. So let's get these folks out of here so we can maintain what we want. And so if we get the free people who would stir trouble out, then we would actually just maintain slavery.
You know what? This is so interesting. And I know this is a diversion from our interview, but when I was in graduate school, my PhD work was on the economics of slavery. And the uniquely bizarre United States position of chattel, where a slave was lower than an animal. And the fact that people say that Lincoln emancipated, and I said, but his agenda was to export the slave back to Africa. And they colonized Liberia to facilitate that exportation.
Actually, the colonization of Liberia happened before Lincoln. Lincoln helped to facilitate the independence of Liberia, and others did too. But that first, it was actually James Monroe.
Oh yes,
it was James Monroe who really facilitated the colonization of Liberia. He commissioned Congress,
United States Congress,
to allocate $100,000 for the first ships
to take
free men and women from America
to Liberia.
And that's why the capital of Liberia is Monrovia.
In honor of him.
After Monroe.
James, that is so incredibly fascinating.
But one other point I want, since you mentioned the kind of revolutions that were taking place in the Southern Hemisphere, Haiti is the first free black nation. Liberia is the second. So Haiti was 1801, Liberia was 1847.
Wow.
And then Ethiopia was the third.
The third.
And this was all before Europe divided Africa. So when Europe divided Africa and colonized Africa, Liberia was already free.
That is absolutely an amazing
the average person,
story.
Unless you really know that history, most people don't know those facts.
But that makes it even more powerful for what you did in terms of, as a young African American woman that was idealist, and I know that time because I was right there. I'm not kidding you. I'm right there with you. And looking at how could we make a difference?
That's right.
How could we make it was such a different spirit in the land.
It was.
And that has changed.
It has changed. It has. I think that you know, there are all these subcultures in any culture,
Yes.
in any country.
Yes.
There are all these subcultures, and I think that the subculture of independence began to shift in America. And I've had this conversation with a lot of people who lived through that nationalism, Pan-Africanism time frame. And one of the things that we said that happened in hindsight is that there was a revolution afoot in every area. You remember it was 1969, the women were burning their bras.
Women were birth control, bras,
That's right.
hot pants.
That's right.
Whatever.
Yeah, and
You
hippies
know.
were just preceded that by a few years.
Yes, just
so the
a few
Cultural
yeah.
Revolution was afoot. You know, the war, the protests against the
Well,
Vietnam
Lyndon
War.
Johnson was taking
That's right.
a whooping.
That's
President
right.
Johnson was taking a whooping.
So,
Vietnam and all the marching and all the violence.
Civil rights.
Civil rights. It was a lot going on.
There were a lot. And so I think that, and so almost anything that you chose to be, that you chose to do that was different and make a difference had almost a platform because everything else was taking place.
Right.
You would stand out so far today to try to have a march of something.
Oh my God.
It has to be some of these major things like a Trayvon Martin or the the situation in this, but the Trayvon Martin situation would have to be one of those kinds of things to really amass an international outcry. Otherwise, people are just trying to pay their rent and put bread on the table for their families.
And you've broken it down. That is so where we are today, which is the motivation for this show. People are in a survival mode, and the issue of class, more than anything else, is here. There is a clear, crisp division.
Yes.
And as I tell Caucasians, being white is not good enough anymore. You better be rich and white. You better be rich and white, because you're going to get pushed into the pile like everybody else.
One of my friends always says that your skin color and your zip code has a whole lot to do. Yeah.
I was reading a discourse written by a gentleman, Professor Allen, who is an Appalachian Caucasian, and he was talking about what about poor whites, just as a sidebar. And it was a brilliant exegesis on this whole issue of what it is to be a poor white. And I kept thinking about, we're right there because the homogenization of our culture, which is dumbing down everyone. And then I read in a Wall Street Journal where the number of entrepreneurs for the first time in history is actually falling. People don't want to start their businesses. They don't want to do anything but get through the day and get off the workplace. They don't want to do any of that. Would you speak to that?
You know, I think that it's sad that that is accurate. Because America was built on entrepreneurs.
Oh my gosh!
You know,
all of our founders.
That's right. The person who might have worked in the foundry would come home and be the person who fixed bikes and worked on your furnace. That was your HVAC repairman.
Right.
He fixed it in the manufacturing company, and then he came home and that was his side business.
Exactly.
And so that is how America was founded.
And we were okay with that.
That was the only way that you
Joe
could get
was
by.
the guy that did the stuff.
That's right.
You didn't call a company, you called him.
That's right.
And he fixed it.
And I don't know where America is going to land with all of this. I'm not an economist, but so I can only speak from my own experience of all of this. And it feels like there's a shift taking place.
There is.
And I don't know where we're going to end up, because it's very like my mother told me to get a trade and always know what you can do. I mean, to this day, you know, I can write a book because I can type well.
Yes.
And I know margins. I mean, I know even though I have a computer that can do all that, I still have the typewriter, you know, perspective on that. And so, but kids aren't raised to believe that that's okay today. And in point of fact, we've gotten so college bound and college focused, which I'm not discounting the value of that. Yeah. But I'm also saying that if you're not a naturally driven person who's going to succeed in an academic setting where your 4-year degree doesn't become a 10-year journey. Yes. And we know.
With lots of debt.
With a lot of debt. Yeah.
A lot of debt.
If it takes you 10 years to get a 4-year degree and you have debt that you can't pay, you might have made some different choices along the way. Right. And so, I think that we don't know what the message is for our kids anymore. The idea of a trade, because we do put down trades, and is trade work even available to them to this point about knowing a trade and starting a business with it. Right. And so, I
mean, because truly the notion of even laying bricks and concrete and fixing sidewalks, I mean, that used to be a trade that generated good money.
It's a whole corporation.
It's now a company.
You have to have they have concrete engineers or something.
Like,
I'm probably not calling the term accurately, but you almost have to have an engineering degree to do that.
Unbelievable.
Today. Yeah.
I am very concerned about this, and I'm very concerned about what is your vision at this time in history while we're going through all of these things with people not working and people struggling, barely making ends meet. Where do you see women as far as being the avatars, the leaders, the mothers? We birth nations. We birth nations. That is so powerful.
We birth nations. We are the avatar, and yet we are the culture bearers. And I think that along the way, we have become so focused on the need to make the money. And I'm not discounting that if the man isn't around, or if somehow he's disabled and unable to be the primary breadwinner, if she ends up having to be that primary breadwinner, she's so busy doing that she can't be the culture bearer. She can't be the person who nurtures her children and help them believe that they can be everything that they can be.
Yes.
And so I think that is so missing these days. And then if she's working 2 or 3 jobs to make ends meet.
Yes, and so many of them are.
Most of them are.
I mean, 2 and 3 jobs.
Well, I was thankfully back in the States, I had gainful employment. But when you have two children that you're raising, I wanted them to go to private school. So I worked at home, again, because I have the skill of secretarial work. I did a lot of things, projects, wrote dissertations, and things like that to make money while still being at home so I could be with my children.
Right.
But when they can't have an option like that, then your kids end up raising themselves. You know, the idea of, I didn't grow up in a latchkey situation.
I didn't either.
Because there was always someone next door, grandparent or something, providing that support for me and my siblings.
Yes.
And so today it costs money to do that, to find that care that provides the protection of your children and the homework and the structure. Kids need structure.
Yes, they do.
In their lives. And so I'm concerned, to answer your question, I'm concerned about the fact that women are having to be all and everything, and yet and still there's a societal message that says, I want to have it all.
Not possible.
And the question is, what is all?
Right.
What do you really want? I think one of the questions that women have to ask themselves in order to be a leader or to be anything else is, what do I want? What is calling me? What is calling me out of my very being to contribute my talent? What is my purpose in life? What am I really here to do that's not just for myself, but will do something in the earth? Most of us, I mean, I have a daughter, what I call a bonus daughter, who's a psychiatrist. yes, she's making good money, but she is healing people as well.
Yes.
So we can all have something that we're doing that is also making a contribution that will be left in the earth as a result of what we're doing. What is that? Do we know what that is? Because oftentimes when we're just busy working to pay the rent, it's not fulfilling. It's not satisfying at all.
Right.
And it depletes us, it depletes our energy, it depletes our minds.
Yes.
It depletes everything about us. We become empty shells.
Yes.
We become
Yes,
empty
we
shells,
do.
and then we're 50 and 60 years old, and we say, where did life go?
And more than where did life go, I'm finding, Diane, with so many of my peers, because I made choices, and as I tell people, I chose to be an entrepreneur. I chose to expose my children as a single mother to a world system that allowed them to see that there were opportunities and that you were not limited. But I paid a price for making those choices. And my children, you'd have to sit up and listen to them, which is, you know, the janitor didn't show up, so we became the janitors. And I said, but I paid you. But my point being is that their perspective about life has been carefully molded, because I wanted them to see a global society of people that had all kinds of values and systems, and learning how to get along with people and to love yourself.
Yes.
And I am very concerned about that absence of the love, because women do not have it themselves. They don't love themselves.
Right.
And I know, and I'm sure you can speak to this, the work world, the private sector, as we call it, is brutal. It decimates the soul. And so you do your time, and it literally is time.
Like a sentence.
Like a sentence. And then you come out, and here are these children who want your time. And you're like, how do I do this? What are your thoughts on that? Is it the church, or do they form little networks of women who can help them? How does that work?
I don't think there's any one answer.
Okay.
I don't think there's any one answer, but I do believe it starts with self.
Okay.
I do think it starts with having a self-inventory. Who am I? What did I come here to do?
Yes.
Who did I come here to be in this world? Just even asking oneself those questions. And there are any number of ways you can work with an executive coach. There are lots of inventories. I love the inventory called Strength Finder, because it really does allow you to do a self-inventory of when you are at your best, what are you doing?
Okay.
And then go get jobs that actually support that.
Right.
It can be your church, it can be your synagogue, it can be your temple, it can be your mosque. There can be any number of places where women can go to get that affirmation of who they are inside of themselves.
So they can become centered.
So they can become centered and really begin to even ponder. But you got to stop doing so much so that you can be in this reflective space. I like to find time every year. On my birthday is my time. Some people use January 1st, but I find I use my birthday as a time to reflect and set goals, intentions for myself to actually go back to school and put a plan in place to do that. Whatever it is, I think that there are places where times that we can take to and create the space to really think about that, so we are living on purpose. I know that God has a purpose and a plan for everyone in the earth.
Does.
Period. What is that for ourselves? We need to know what that is, so that we're living on purpose with that plan. You know, kids used to say, I didn't do it, it was an accident, I didn't do it on purpose. But we want to live on purpose.
Yes, we do.
We want to live on purpose. And I think we also have to show up for those opportunities. There are so many opportunities. Michelle, I went to the United Nations last year. I participated in the Commission on the Status of Women in February and March of 2012.
Okay.
You know how I did that?
I'd like to hear that. How did you do that?
I arrived at, after doing one of these self-reflections and having a coach, I arrived at that my purpose right now is no longer to be a midwife delivering babies. My purpose is to serve as midwife to women and men's dreams and possibilities.
Oh my goodness. You became a birthing agent.
To be a support to their birthing their dreams and possibilities.
Yes.
I told that to a woman at a conference of 30 people that I had never met. I had never met this woman before. She came in from New York City. And I said this to her, and I said, I want to write a book about women and their dreams, and I need to meet diverse women in order to do that. She says to me, so first of all, I'm sharing my vision.
Yes.
And we have to be careful, because you don't want to share your vision or your dream to someone who's going to blow it over.
Oh, please.
And you're stupid. Who do you
Please,
think you are?
Dream crushers.
Yes, people can
Dream
do
crushers.
that.
Yes, they
and
can.
if you have self-doubt, you're going to hold it under a bushel. You're not going to share that dream with anyone.
Yes.
But I found faith in my ability to talk to her. And she says, well, Diane, you must come to the Commission on the Status of Women next year. She was on the committee.
Oh my goodness, intentionality.
That's right.
Oh my goodness.
And so within a month,
goodness.
I was
That's
on a
wonderful.
conference call with the other members, and I ended up being a delegate as a part of the Episcopal Church. You know, I'm not an Episcopal church, remember?
But God doesn't care.
Open up the door.
So
you have to show, my point is show up. Show up in sharing the vision. And when she said, come to the commission, I had to Google. I had known sort of about it, but like, if I'm going to see myself in, I had to go Google it. I'm like, oh my God, intimidation tried to set in.
I know that's right. Oh my gosh, I know that's right.
Tried to set in.
Goodness.
But I showed up. And not only that, the provision was made for me to stay at the United Nations Hilton. Okay?
Go on.
Okay?
Come on.
I'm just saying that the provisions were there, and then I interviewed 25 women from around the world.
Oh.
And only one woman of the women that I tapped did not follow through on actually doing the interview. I interviewed a woman who had been imprisoned and tortured by Saddam Hussein.
Oh.
I interviewed a woman from Bangladesh, who is trying to save women from sex slavery. I mean, women who have been circumcised, who are goat herders in Africa, who have been female circumcision has been performed on them, and they're changing that in the young lives of girls in their villages. I interviewed so many women who are doing remarkable things, and I'm writing a book about that right now.
Oh, please,
but this is
wonderful.
This is an example of how you show up in your own life so that you can just move into the things that that God would have you to do. And it doesn't always mean that it's going to be perfect, but you don't know. And I would have never, and while I will also talk about having a plan, the reality is that the United Nations would have never been on a plan.
That's
so you have to be willing to be ready and open for the surprise that can take place in your life.
Or the aha moment. Aha. It is here. You know what, as just kind of speaking on that, I went to an event, the Queen Nefertiti Awards, held by the Cincinnati Herald. I came, and I always loved that. I emceed one year, but the keynote speaker was Cynthia Booth, who owns McDonald's, several McDonald's franchises. And I knew Cynthia because we were both bankers.
Okay.
And Cynthia shared her story, which was just amazing. And to bring you to tears, she had determined that she wanted to shift, that she was not interested in banking.
Wow.
I know the feeling. And that she was interested in McDonald's, not because of the food, but because of the brand. And for 2 years, Cynthia Booth worked at night running a McDonald's. They would not sell her a franchise.
Wow.
So she worked at day as this high-powered senior level executive for a major bank, and at night she worked at McDonald's to learn. And she did this for 2 years, crushing 2 jobs to fulfill what she wanted to do.
Yes.
As a result of her tenacity, she now has over 500 employees. She's seeing their lives change. And I listened to her, and I was so moved.
Yes.
Because she made a decision.
That's right.
That there was no purpose where she was.
Yes.
And it didn't matter. She had to, even if it meant working a second night job.
Yes.
She had to do
to learn the business.
To learn the business. And now here she is just doing phenomenal. And you can't be jealous. You could only be excited for her.
No is a vitamin pill for me.
Oh, me too.
You tell me no, I'm going to say, okay, let me take this vitamin and see what you're going to see after this.
That's right. I know that's right. And I only say that because, again, I've been in finance and banking since really high school, handling money. And yet my passion was as a biochemist. And plants, and I'm a herb society person and all that stuff. I love digging and dirt and flowers and food and everything, and wound up on a mission overseas into Africa and got totally involved in this project which birthed Sheaology. And we sell medical grade shea oil all over the world. And I tell folks, it still isn't pretty.
Right.
But this is what I'm destined to do.
Love. Yes.
I do it if I didn't have a dime.
Right.
I do it because of the women, because of the children, because of the hope. So your position inspires me so much and gives me courage.
Yeah. Well, and you know what? Someone said to me that a commitment to follow your call is something that you wouldn't even do if you knew what you were going to have to go through to do it.
Tell me at 12:30 this morning as I was like, why am I doing this?
And so it allows you to find out what you're really made out of. When we keep doing the same old thing over and over again, when we want to play it safe,
right?
When we're always looking for someone else's approval, these are the things that hold us back.
And destroy the soul.
That's right. They do destroy the soul.
They do destroy the soul,
When you do that, you're not going to step into who you were made to be.
Oh, how do you get this out?
And again, when you do it, like you said, the hope that you're building in people, the healing that you're bringing to people's limbs and all of that, and the finances that you're bringing back into those rural villages, those are the things that allow you to stay up at night. It's a cost. You are definitely paying a price, but it's not like working on the chain gang.
Girl.
It's not that kind of a price. Yeah.
Oh,
it's not that kind of a price.
No, that's
you
right.
know, you're losing some sleep. You're going to have some bags on the eyes. You have to get the concealer and all of that out. But you are finding joy. When I'm doing what ignites my passion, I feel so much joy on the inside, even when I'm tired.
Yes.
When you're tired and still feel joy, and you can see the benefit that you're making to other people, to me, there is nothing better on earth than to know that you're playing that kind of role. And you're leaving a legacy, by the way, when you're doing that. And it's not for aggrandizement, because sometimes people will never see what you're doing.
Never.
And if you're doing it for that, then it's really about ego.
Right.
That's for ego. When you have to have your name in lights. No, your name might get in lights because you've made such a contribution, but you're not doing it for that.
Right.
And so it's so important to really understand that. The other thing I've learned about what holds women back in particular is fear. Sometimes when I'm doing coaching, I will ask a woman, what would you be doing if you were not afraid?
Oh my goodness.
If you were not afraid. And the number one thing that we're afraid of is that we're going to be a bad mom, a bad wife, or a bad daughter. They call that the trinity of fear. The trinity of fear.
Bad wife,
bad mother, bad daughter. That's what women feel.
Oh, geez.
So that means that we have to just do everything our husband says, do everything our mother says, and do everything our children say.
Right.
Where's how we treat ourselves?
Right. And where are you in that expression?
Exactly.
If you're busy making everybody else happy,
getting their approval.
Right.
And that just says that every time I've been in a situation, I don't know about you, but every time I've been in a situation where I was seeking another person's approval, it was not reachable. Because if they set a bar and you reach it, well, then they just gonna keep setting the bar.
Exactly.
They're gonna keep setting it. So you can't ever reach and achieve someone else's approval of you. You can't.
Daughters need to get liberated from their mothers.
And from their
husbands and male figures.
That's right.
Yeah, and their children.
And their
children can
can play a number on you.
Oh, come on.
That guilt trip. The guilt trip that your mother can put on you and that your children can put on you. Oh my God, you might need some pills.
Valium, please help me. That is so amazing.
So
Okay.
those are the kinds of things that hold us back. And I think that when we do get liberated, and it doesn't mean just say, forget all of these people, but it is about sometimes recalibrating our
I
relationship
like that
with
term.
them. Recalibrating.
Recalibrating
The relationship.
The relationship.
With,
How do you do
with
that?
my sons in particular, and sons will definitely recalibrate their relationship with you. Because no son wants to be a mama's boy.
None. I have a son in Florida. I said, well, okay.
But one of the things that I did at about 19, 20 years old,
Okay.
was to say to them, I will always be your mother, but I am not parenting you anymore. There's a difference between being a mother and still trying to parent a grown child.
It looks absurd, actually.
It does. And they don't want it, and you really don't want it. And that's the fastest way to get your feelings hurt.
Right. Let them be.
And that's how it's letting them be, but it's creating what is going to be our medium of communication? What will be the reasons why they call me? Mm-hmm. What will be the reasons why I call them? Now, we talk all the time.
Right.
But the question is, did you eat well? How you doing? Did you sleep last night? That's what you do to a 10-year-old.
Yes, exactly.
That's not what you do to your 25-year-old son.
Right, exactly.
But your mother instinct will want to parent that way. And then, of course, they don't want to hear that.
And they shouldn't.
They should not.
Mm-hmm.
They should not. But, the other reason why so many women can't, oh my God, Christine Northrup wrote a book about our body, our wisdom, ourselves. And she said the reason why so many women have breast disease, not always cancer, but sometimes it's a cyst or a lump or something like that.
But it's localized to the breast.
It's localized to the breast.
Okay.
Is when our children go off to college, when they're leaving the nest. And our mammal glands are our nurturing place for our children.
Right.
And that anxiety, that stress, and that fear resides there. And sickness emerges. The disease is dis-ease.
Right.
It's dis-ease.
Dis-ease.
That's right.
Got it.
And so metaphorically, the dis-ease that we have about the fact that our children are now going to, pray tell, live on their own. Pray tell, have a life of their own without me.
Yeah, I know.
Causes those mammal glands to have dis-ease, and oftentimes sickness emerges there.
Wow.
And so I think it's something to pay attention to, of how we worry about the empty nest syndrome when we really need to be recalibrating that relationship with our children so that they can be free and we can be free as well.
Fast forward, what are you doing now in the remaining moments that we have?
So I have an ebook that's going to be coming out in the next 2 months called "Are You Riding in the Backseat of Your Dream?" So it's not a surprise that I'm talking a lot about dreams here. But are you riding in the backseat of your own dream? Because that's when I'm doing my reflection time, and I'm thinking about where am I in relationship to my dreams. If I ever feel stuck, that's what emerges to me. Am I riding in the backseat of my own dream? Who's driving my dream?
Right.
Am I following somebody else's dream and passion, or am I following my own? It's about taking responsibility for the journey to achieve your dream and your aspirations. So I interviewed women. This is not the book for the UN women. That's going to be coming out next year. But these are other women that I've interviewed, a broad range of women who share their stories and their revelations to themselves about how they got stuck, what their distractions were. This one woman said, I can't wait to get in the comfortable front seat of my car. But it's just a metaphor to play with, where am I in relationship to my dream? One woman said, sometimes I'm in the trunk of my dream. Sometimes I'm not even in the car of my dream. And
now that's coming out as an ebook.
It's coming out as an ebook, and it'll be available within the next 2 months, I think.
Is there a website that we need to tell people to go to?
Yeah, I'll give you my website. There will be one that will be available to people, but my website is www.thembispeaks, THEMBI speaks.com. So www.thembispeaks.com is my website. But it will also be available through Amazon, Barnes and Noble, all of the Sony, iTunes,
Okay.
iBooks.
Oh, yeah.
It's
Oh,
going to be
yeah.
available through all of the platforms.
That is so, I am so honored to have a woman of your stature
Thank you.
on my show.
Thank you. And I do want to mention, too, that I did write a book about Liberia. It is called Free Soil. It was published in 2010, and it's available on Amazon right
as
now.
well. Okay.
Amazon.com. It's called Free Soil by Diane Jordan-Grizzard.
Goodness gracious. An amazing, amazing story, an amazing woman.
Thank you.
I am blessed.
Thank
blessed.
You. I'm blessed to be able to,
I'm just blessed.
when I ask women to share their stories with me, some of them have cried because women want to have someone bear witness to their experience.
Yes, yes.
And so you have allowed me to share my story with your audience, and they will be bearing witness to my experience and my story. It's just a way of validating who we are and the road that we have traveled. We're not our story. We're not our story because people can get stuck. Oh my God, this happened and that. So we're not our story, but our story is part of how we got to where we are. And people just want to have that voice acknowledged, and they want to be affirmed through that story.
And on that note, viewers, we are concluding today's session of The Power of Money with my most remarkable guest, Diane Grizzard. I encourage you to go to her website. I encourage you to share what you've learned today. And again, as I close out today's segment, God's peace be with you and God bless you. You take care. Have a good day.